If any of you have ever watched the Netflix series Black Mirror, you may be familiar with the episode called Nosedive. And if you have not seen that episode, I highly recommend that you do because it is a brilliant example of, a very possible near term future involving social credit systems. And the episode's pretty interesting, and I won't go into it. I'll just say that it's very illustrative and very near term. We're not far away from that. China is actually experimenting with social credit systems, and basically what these systems are is a way. It's kind of like an alternate currency, and it's a way to control behavior. So in the ideal social credit system, you're rewarded with points for being nice or considerate or productive or things that your society benefit. Okay, and if you don't behave the way you are expected to behave, you will lose points. And if you don't have enough points, you might not be able to get a certain job or go to a certain school or get the best health care or get a date from someone. There's all kinds of implications around social credit systems, which is one reason that the Europeans banned the use of social credit systems. Now, they're democratic. Now, China has no problem with it. It seems like they're kind of experimenting with that system right now, and so we're going to see what happens. I hope to God we don't start playing with those types of things in the United States, but we're just going to have to wait and see. Another risk is the cognitive impacts that this technology is already starting to show on us right now, and that is the Flynn effect. Some of you may or may not know the Flynn effect is the idea that over the long course of generations, children tend to have slightly higher IQs in every generation. They tend to get a little bit smarter, and that's there's a lot of theories as to why that might be, but generally kids have been learning. If you look at the curriculum of, say, a freshman in high school now versus a freshman in high school maybe 40, 50 years ago, like when I was in school, it would be very different. It would be much more intense for the current freshmen than it would be for the ones that were, in the past. So, but however, we are starting to see, I think in the last 10 years, we've seen a reversal of that effect, that IQ has been falling. And there's all kinds of theories as to why that is, but I have a reference to the paper that was written by Oakley and her colleagues that just recently came out in May around this, and it's fascinating, and how they propose we mitigate that bad trend, if you will. Social media impacts our teens profoundly. As if you are a parent of a teen, I highly recommend the book The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, who's a brilliant sociologist, wrote The Righteous Mind in 2012, which is, I think, the definitive work that describes the differences between conservatives and liberals in terms of their mindsets and how they think. But the Anxious Generation is one his most current work, and it documents some very, very disturbing trends in terms of how social media has impacted teens, both teen boys and teen girls. One of the spoilers I'm going to give you is that it damages teenage girls worse than it does boys, although it damages both, but not equally. It's a little bit harsher on teen girls for a number of reasons, which he talks about in the book. And not just psychologically, they're starting to see physical damage in the brain as a result of the impacts that social media algorithms have had on our kids. So if you have teenagers, I highly recommend you check out that book. the application of human vices and societal problems is very much at risk. The Rohingya genocide in Myanmar in 2016, 17-ish. There is a I think Facebook basically contributed to that genocide. Now, how much you think they contributed to it is open to debate, but it is not zero, and it is very real. Their algorithms promoted content that made an already very bad situation in Myanmar much, much worse, and more than likely caused thousands of people to die needlessly. In just recently, like last week, I read about Meta suing this company called Crush AI, and I didn't even know what Crush AI was until I read this piece. But basically, it's a generative AI application where you give that application a picture of someone, and it will create a picture of that person without their clothes on. How wonderful is that? So these are the types of things. Not only that, it's gonna amplify things like inequality and all kinds of effects that we're not necessarily going to like. So this is another thing to be aware of. The AI is going to amplify a lot of good things, and it's going to amplify a lot of bad things. So be ready. It's an amplifier is kind of the takeaway from all this. Last couple bullet points are a little more subtle, but the idea that democracy is a conversation. The public conversation needed for a healthy democracy must be among humans. When AI bots are injected into the public discourse, especially if they're not disclosed, it's going to warp and distort that necessary communication that's going to help us, be healthy in our debates around issues and how we move forward in a productive sense, and instead of just wanting to kill each other because we don't see things eye to eye. And of course, autonomous weapon systems, that's a pretty obvious one as well. So I would contend that AI needs a leash and not guardrails. You probably heard some authors write about the need for guardrails for AI. And I would say the guardrails work if you have a very limited problem that you understand really well. If you know how AI could go off the rails in every conceivable form, then guardrails are fine. Then you can prevent those things from happening. Unfortunately, most things are more complicated than even we realize up front. And AI will exploit some paths that we never even thought of. So because of that ability, that capability, AI needs a leash, if you will, metaphorically. It needs to be overseen by humans in order to assure that it doesn't go off the rails and do more damage than we might expect. So the last section is regulation, mitigation, and preparation. And Aaron is going to talk a little bit more about this. But so some things have happened. The Take It Down Act, which was passed in May of this year, was actually one of the rare instances of bipartisanship on Capitol Hill these days. There wasn't even a floor vote. Basically, there's a procedure in the Senate that if it's pretty obvious that all the senators are going to vote for it, they basically say anybody oppose it. If nobody opposes it, it passes. So there wasn't even a floor vote on it. It's a start. It doesn't actually it doesn't cover a lot. It doesn't cover anything beyond the idea that if an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend posts content that you don't approve of or didn't consent to, there could be serious penalties for that. And if children are involved, the penalties are even more severe. So, it's a start, and I applaud that there's at least a start, but there's a whole lot more that needs to be done. Even Colorado focuses their AI law just came out a few months ago, and the fact that there were the advocates for safety and the entrepreneurs that were working in AI both were unhappy with the bill, probably tells me that legislators struck a reasonable balance at this point in time. But it only addresses algorithmic biases in 8 consequential areas. Like getting a job or getting a spot in a university or things like that. So it's very limited, but at least it's a start. There's a proposed 10-year moratorium for any state level AI regulation in the current budget bill that's on Capitol Hill. And thank goodness that even some Republicans are seeing that this is a very dangerous proposal. 10 years in this field is like 100 years somewhere else. So me personally, and I think a lot of people that really understand what's going on here, would be very much against this idea of this moratorium. I think it's incredibly dangerous and irresponsible, but we'll see how it plays out. One of the things that my wife and I do to mitigate the possible dangers of AI is that we have a code word that only we know. So if I suspect in a moment that I might not be talking to my wife or a loved one, I'll ask for the code word, and the AI is not going to know how to spit that out. And that's only one layer of defense, but at least it's something. It's unfortunately what we have to start thinking about right now. So, along the same lines, we need to stay curious and engaged and get help from people like Aaron and other knowledgeable folks that have worked with this stuff in order to mitigate this landscape.